I worked as a correspondent. I went down to work for Rolex in Oneida Silverware. That was one of my first jobs. And first thing I know, I was suggesting, like, if you move this desk, you move that desk, and everything, you don't need me. So I went and told the president. And the president said to me, "You're never going to leave this firm." First thing I know, I was on the order desk, and I was, arranging all the orders. But what I was doing was contacting some of the people for the salesman and saying, we've got this new line out. Would you like me to put through two or three, four, tea sets for you? First thing I know, then I was in charge of the whole order desk and all the complaints and all the correspondence for the whole company. So I had experience with correspondence, and then I worked for Manulife. I was doing the correspondence, for the um, vice president there. So when I see some of my letters that I send out, I send out a letter to the Honorable Raymond Anderchuk in Ottawa. I believe she was the human rights or seniors or something. And I gave a detailed list of how our records should be protected. And with regard to the physicists and surgeons who arranged for the theft of all the papers I told them I had, I gave them copies of tests that I found that had been manipulated, changed, tests that were words removed, like excessive damage removed off one of my tests. I gave a detailed list saying that the physicians and surgeons cannot be in charge of deciding whether or not people have a complaint. They're physicians and surgeons, and you're complaining about doctors and hospitals. And I said it has to be people, like that have no interest, nothing, no accident design, um, that are in charge of making the decision, and also what anybody injured, the relatives and everything from a death or something like that from a hospital would be able to get. And I actually got a letter from her saying that you have to see the physician surgeons after me telling her that they arranged for my records stolen. I was then told that there is no such person in Ottawa. So, in other words, as I found anything and as I investigated things, everything was disappearing, not only from my files, but I was being told that there was nobody there by that name. Her name was Honorable Raymel Anderchek. And I was told there's no such person, and yet she'd written me a letter. And this kept going on. Now, I do not believe the way the system is set up now. I have to laugh when I hear the United States going to get a health care system. Every time I put my OHIP card in anywhere in Toronto, it identified me. I then found that I was getting looks from the doctor. I would be the last taken, and they were denying my established issues. I have 7 cardiologists in Toronto who denied established issues that I already have the test showing. Findings of definite pathological significance. February the 9th, 2006, and Toronto East General Hospital put arrived by ambulance with skin disorders. Send me home. But first, they attempted to poison me. They put me at the far end of the emergency room, and an older woman, heavy set, I would, with my memory, I would know her if I saw her. I would say that she was head of the nursing staff at Toronto East General. She had a stiff hat on and she had a pin on her lapel. She came in and pushed a pin in my mouth against my will, and I immediately spit it out. But it started to disintegrate. For 3 weeks, I had the highest temperature. I could hardly breathe like broken glass in there, and a metallic taste in my mouth. I phoned United States Poison Control, and they told me get to emergency. The symptoms you're describing to us sounds like a dangerous substance. In a hospital? And I kept finding more and more of these things. And yet everything I found was being taken off me. So how do you solve all this? First of all, as I said, physicians and surgeons can't be in charge of people's grievances. What did your loved one really die of when you think about it? Doctors and hospitals can decide when people can live and when they can die. They decided that not only was I going to die, painfully die, and they were never going to admit anything wrong with me. And I kept finding more and more information. As I said, they became haunted by what I kept finding, and I was hunted for it. So, in looking all over anything, I did everything superhuman possible, trying to get medical care first. And then it was 9/11 when I pulled over to the side of the curb and I started sobbing because I knew that I was in my own 9/11. I was never going to get medical care. Not with all this going and worsening, and I never gave up. And I never gave up. I never once said there's a conspiracy against me. But in the back of my mind, until finally a Dr. Cron at Toronto General Hospital told me, "You're being persecuted for finding my tests that were tampered with, words removed, for finding the manipulated hospital records." I wrote letters and delivered them myself to every single hospital, every CEO. I never stopped. I was relentless. And then I kept finding all the post offices that were involved. Can you imagine? None of my letters were reaching anybody. I sent out CDs. Nobody had them. All my copies are all gone. And then I started noticing that the return letters can't deliver as addressed. They all had exactly the same postmark on them, no matter where I mailed them. And then I found out I have this remarkable memory. I don't even know how I do it myself. When I saw that one not able to deliver as addressed, I sat for 1 hour and a half. I'd seen that handwriting before. Sure enough, that was in 2007. And in 2001, December the 14th, in my dentist's office, Dr. Hong at Sunnybrook, he said I had congestive heart failure, and that was 2001, December the 14th. I didn't know it, and I'd never told him, but he saw me struggling to get to his office each time. He had it in his records, and there's the same handwriting in some of the notes that I'd picked up. Same handwriting. And then I found out that other things kept happening. The post office was involved. I wrote a letter to Tremblay, the ombudsman of the post office in Ottawa, and I'm telling him I can't deliver letters, but I said, I want you to deliver this one letter, Montel Williams TV, and it's one page in here, all stamped, ready to go. And Montel Williams answered me. He answered me and said he'd received my letter, and there was his label on the outside and his acknowledgement inside. Montel Williams answered a letter he never received. Because 3 days later, Tremblay of the post office in Ottawa returned the letter I gave him to mail. The post office was refusing, knowing I can't mail a letter, was refusing to deliver one for me. And all the things that I had were all taken. All the letters with the same stamp, returned, not able to deliver. Montel letter that I asked the post office to mail after I phoned Mr. Cherry at the Toronto office. He came and looked at what I had, and everything was gone from my apartment 3 days after he was there. My lock files, everything. I could not do anything except tell everybody, and as fast as I told anybody, it was disappearing.